What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 165 on this Friday, April 11th, 2025. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy, with you on a Friday. First time in a few weeks, at least.
We're back. This feels weird. Yeah, I haven't podcasted and it feels like years at this point. So we're going to shake the rust off today, but good to be back with you and everyone else out there, my friend.
No doubt. We had obviously the layoff and just kind of the way it timed. Collin went out of town right before the layoff, and we came back, and so it's just kind of been the way it kind of fell. But we're back at it. We're back on a normal 2-show-a-week rhythm, I assume, here for obviously throughout the rest of the spring and into the summer before next season, which will be here before you know it. On the show today, Crimson Combine weekend, obviously replacing the spring game weekend. Still a big recruiting weekend, though. We got the right guy to talk about it with here with our guy CK. The recruiting visitor list is on Sooners Illustrated right now for our VIP members. We'll go through some of the names to know on the recruiting side going into Crimson Combine weekend. Of course, look at all the latest with the quarterbacks as that continues to be a major storyline in 2026. And Collin's favorite, the transfer portal. It's about to reopen. Some of the storylines there, some of the names to know that Oklahoma already is pursuing. We'll get into that a little bit as well on the program today, a Friday edition of the podcast. But like I said, Collin, let's start with the Crimson Combine weekend.
Yeah.
Replacing the spring game. Before we get any kind of specifics, I feel like I just want to ask an obvious question, one that I'm sure a lot of fans are curious. You know, even if you only vaguely keep up with recruiting, I'm sure fans understand and know that the spring game weekend is typically a big weekend. A lot of guys come into town. There's a lot of alumni, all that. This year, with the fact that there's not actually a game and they're doing the Crimson Combine instead, kind of compare it, I guess, to a normal year on the recruiting side of it. Someone who would know, how does this compare to a normal year? Is it going to be about the same, or is it going to look a little different than normal?
I think it's just like the Crimson Combine versus the spring game. It's going to be different, and you kind of just have to accept that's the way that this thing is going. That being said, though, I really want to emphasize this part. Because it's different, you have to find the right approach. And I commend Oklahoma's staff for specifically the way that they're approaching the Crimson Combine recruiting side of the equation. And what I mean by that is this. To your question and to your point, usually the spring game is a lot of fanfare and there's a lot going on outside of the game. And because of that, it's usually pretty extensive. I mean, Oklahoma fans always have done a great job of showing out in like 50K strong for these spring games. But usually you get, I mean, it doesn't feel like hyperbole to say 100+ recruits for these spring games as well, because you can throw them all in the visitor section, just like a fall weekend.
On the field during this thing, I can attest. There's the room to move is limited down there.
Yeah, I want to say around this time last year, you and I were talking about how you had a hard time just turning your shoulders to get a shot of the team because they cycle all these guys through. It's going to be different, but again, it's about how you capitalize on a unique situation. And in Oklahoma's case, I'm putting the visitor list together. I'm talking to a few folks, and OU is basically saying, look, we still get the benefit from an event going on. Like there's something happening. There's something for them to kind of direct their attention towards. But at the same time, because of the structure of this event, we're now getting a little bit more personal exposure to these guys. We get to spend a little bit more time with them. And I said it to a few people out there, both on the recruiting trail side, the Oklahoma side, or whatever else. I like this concept. I mean, OU is essentially bringing in a select group and prioritizing certain individuals. They're getting priority targets on campus. They're getting these guys in that they really want. They're letting them see a layer to this program, and then they're going to be around them for a long time. In the case of a few certain individuals that we're getting ready to talk about, it'll actually be multiple days worth of time. And you honestly, Josh, probably don't get that through a spring game because of everything that goes into the preparation for it and so on and so forth. That's not to say that there's not a lot of effort going into the Crimson Combine, but I think everyone can understand, as opposed to, I don't know, for lack of a term, getting a game plan and everything together. these guys are going to go out and have a practice. And so, again, I think it's interesting that they are kind of making this about priority targets, a certain number of individuals they really like, getting them around the program and spending a lot of time with them. And by way of that, kind of maximizing the weekend that is the Crimson Combine.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. You know, we've been talking about it really all spring. You and I, as just everyone around OU football, just what is this actually going to look like? And this is another wrinkle to it is, you know, are they going to be able to recreate the hoopla of a spring game? Especially when you think of a couple years ago when they've done Baker Mayfield statue, then Kyler Murray statue. Like, obviously, you're not going to have something like that every year. But it's like, can they still make it a big weekend without, A, something like that, and then B, the game? You know, they're replacing it with this Crimson Combine thing, which they added some stuff to. You know, since we did the Monday show where we kind of previewed it as best we can. Again, we don't know what it's totally going to look like. They've added more events. They added a 7-on-7. They added just 30 more minutes in general. They added like O-line, D-line battles is I think matchups is how they termed it. You know, so we'll see what it looks like, and you know, we'll see if recruits like it and if it sells. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, the spring game, it kind of is what it is, but it's always kind of been a big celebration weekend of the program. Is it still going to feel that way, or is it going to feel like this weird thing? You know, we'll find out tomorrow.
I don't know.
Tom, James, and myself will be there to offer. I kind of joked about on Monday, whatever coverage looks like. I don't. Again, it's new, so we'll be there, and whatever happens, we'll have it for you. As far as, you know, the actual visitor list, again, the list is on the website. As always, when we do these things, these big weekends, you're not going to go through every single name. You want to subscribe to Oklahoma247sports.com. It's a great time to do so. You can get a full look at that list. It was out real early. I believe we were the first one to have it up. Collin did a great job on that, and he always is on top of getting the full visitor list in these big weekends where I think Collin does some of his best work. What are the storylines for you on the recruiting end of it, and guys who are going to be in town that have your interest in particular over the next, like you said, couple of days for this big weekend at the end of spring camp?
Yeah, it's weird. Just a thought that I've been having is it's like you normally talk to these guys about the weekend, and I'm genuinely going to be interviewing them, but also picking their brain because I'm not going to be able to watch whatever happens this week.
Right.
I'm about to talk to these recruits, not just for our subscribers, but I'm going to be plugged into your highlights on the YouTube channel, and I'm going to figure out what these guys saw. And I'm curious to see some of their reactions, hear what they have to say, kind of pick their brain on it, because it's a very unique concept. This isn't really something that's taken the sport by storm. But I think what's interesting, kind of to your point, like Oklahoma is going to be doing a little bit of line of scrimmage emphasis in this. I know they're doing some one-on-one O-line, D-line, and I think Gabe Eichard said on social media there's like a half-line drill included in the schedule, which is more O-line, D-line work.
Sure.
And on that note, I think kind of one of the sub-headlines of the weekend is defensive line recruiting. You know, I was having this thought while you were raising a whole new life and being a responsible adult. I was just sitting at home thinking about football. You know, you really can't take the direction of Oklahoma's defensive line for granted these days under the direction of Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis and Brent Venables. And I think that's not only come to fruition as far as the actual team front, which we will see on Saturday. This weekend, they're getting ready to host a couple of big-time defensive linemen. I'm going to go ahead and throw out Luke Waffle, high four-star edge rusher in the top 247, projects as like a true defensive end type. Big dude. Oklahoma was actually after his older brother in the transfer portal not too long ago, and he will be there. Not for the Crimson Combine. He leaves just before. He's wrapping up his visit today and will leave this Friday afternoon. And then shortly after hosting a 4-star top 247 defensive end, they're going to bring in a couple of big name targets. Valdon Sohn, I believe the number 41 overall player in the country for us at 24/7 Sports, one of the top defensive tackles in the country. I've heard a lot of Oklahoma and Florida buzz here. There are a number of other big-name contenders in the mix for Valdon Sohn, but this is a guy that went from outside the top 247 into the top 50 because we really believe in this player. He's an international guy, a ton of untapped potential, remaining with Valdensone. And Oklahoma has been prioritizing him because of this. Getting him on campus to me is a huge deal. I would argue this is one of the names that we're not talking enough about in relation to Oklahoma. But as we know, again, they sink their teeth into some of these defensive tackle recruits and they make it interesting. Valdensone is one to monitor. And so getting him on campus if he arrives is a big deal. And then there's Jake Kroll, another edge rusher defensive end type out of IMG Academy. Yeah. Jake is one that not too long ago, I mean, it felt like almost the entire Oklahoma staff flew out to go see and visit with out there. And Oklahoma's in the mix with Michigan and a couple of other big names. Again, an IMG guy, a high, I believe he's in the top 60 for us in the country, 4-star talent. So Jake Kroll, Valdensone, Luke Waffle, a lot of defensive line talent, Josh, specifically going to be around Norman this weekend. And I think that's, again, very telling as to what this OU staff has accomplished within that specific position group.
Yeah, and like you said, not something you want to take for granted. We've, gotten a little used to it, since Brent Venables came aboard. And obviously Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis have been there every step of the way. We've talked about that a couple times. The continuity there hasn't been turnover on the defensive staff. It's largely been the same other than the DC spot. Brandon Hall, Jay Valai, these guys have all been around. And that's how you build up that depth. And we talk about it all the time with after the safety room and certainly the cornerback room a little bit as well. But you're right. I mean, the defensive line, you continue to add guys like this that they're trying to. Guys will be in town this weekend. That's how you do it, especially in the SEC. Someone you didn't mention who will be in town this weekend on the offensive side, quarterback Jaden O'Neal. We've talked about this, I feels like just about every recruiting show for a while now. But obviously it's been a few weeks, like we talked about at the top, since we last spoke on the show and about just kind of the latest with the 26 quarterbacks. It's the biggest storyline right now in recruiting. You certainly know as well as anyone. I mean, our VIP members ask all the time, what's the deal? How is this going?
Yeah.
Jaden O'Neal's going to be in town. He's on your visitor list for the Crimson Combine. Since we last did a show, he's also taken a couple other visits to other places. We talked previously, a month ago about him visiting Georgia. He's had a couple more since then. Meanwhile, OU is still after Bowe Bentley. That has not slowed down. He put out a top 3, it was, I believe, and OU's on it.
Yep.
Paint a picture. It's an ever-changing thing, and we continue to do this, but what's the latest here with these two guys, and how do you kind of seeing this continue to form as Jaden O'Neal's going to be in town this weekend, or he already is. He's going to be on campus this weekend for the Crimson Combine.
Yeah, so obviously the situation itself can pretty much be described the same way every single time we talk about this. But since we've last podcasted, there have been a lot of newsworthy developments that have taken place in relation to these two. And so to quickly kind of run down, you did a good job of mentioning some of the headlines. But since we've last podcasted, if I remember correctly, Bowe Bentley visited, then went out and struck out on a couple of other trips, which obviously are going to shape that recruitment even further. Jaden O'Neal not only visited Georgia, but visited Florida State and Auburn, if I remember correctly, then stated publicly on the record with our own Mike Roach out at the Elite 11 that Jaden O'Neal, he does not have any interest in being part of a 2-quarterback class. He is hoping that communication picks up with Ben Arbuckle and OU's staff. He's hoping for a little bit more clarity on the situation, and he's actively listening to other suitors because of this dynamic. And he said, kind of on a similar note, that he's going to listen to programs that want him and him specifically. And another layer to this is Florida State has ramped up pursuit of Daniel Odom, Oklahoma's 4-star wide receiver. We had an interview up a couple of weeks ago where Odom said, Jaden O'Neal is my guy, that we're childhood best friends. He also in that same interview said, I'm going to book a Florida State official visit. And that's now on the calendar. And as all this is going on, Bowe Bentley not only drops his top 3 of Oklahoma, LSU, and Georgia, he books those 3 official visits. And of note, his OU official visit weekend, as currently constructed, he will be the only recruit in Norman that weekend specifically. And so Oklahoma is pretty much saying, like, we're going to have a bunch of official visit weekends and the Bowe Bentley weekend, which is so it's a big deal.
Bowe Bentley weekend, yeah.
And so LSU, I do want to say, has really surged from what I've heard with Bowe Bentley. I legitimately believe that the Tigers have a shot to overtake Oklahoma when it's all said and done. OU continues to prioritize them. And look, I think that the decision timelines here are definitely finally starting to collide a little bit. Both of these guys kind of have to figure out what they're getting ready to do. And on that note, it feels like we're going to have even more clarity come out of the Crimson Combine weekend, because this will I don't want to say be the first time, but it legitimately feels like truly the first time that Oklahoma and Jaden O'Neal will have a true opportunity to sit down and communicate everyone's thoughts here.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the summation of the situation going into this thing, is that we're going to have everything that's going on. But at some point, if Jaden O'Neal comes to the Crimson Combine, there's going to have to be interaction there. And by way of interaction, there's going to be thoughts and there's going to be a little bit of sorting to do. So it's a fascinating dynamic that continues to play out. And yet another chapter in this book will be written this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think the headliner there of everything you just said certainly is Jaden expressing not really that interested in doing a 2-quarterback class, because that's been the question the whole time, every step of the way. That's been the question: are these guys good with going together potentially? And obviously Jaden committed before Bowe Bentley became a thing, if you want to put it that way. And obviously, you would think that Bowe is either good with it or thinks that, there could be a change as he considers Oklahoma. That's always been a question, would both guys theoretically come together if it came to that? And to really get a more firm statement from one of them as kind of being like, yeah, not really what I would like to do. It certainly, that's a major development as far as how this is going to actually shake out. So we'll see. Like you said, Jaden's going to be in town this weekend, so you would figure there will be conversations with him and Ben Arbuckle, with him and obviously with Brent Venables and really the whole staff. And it's worth remembering again, and I'm sure OU fans realize this, but Jaden O'Neal was not Ben Arbuckle's guy. This was back in the previous regime. He was a Seth Luttrell guy, and we think Jaden O'Neal is extremely talented. But Ben Arbuckle comes in, he sees someone that he really likes in Bowe Bentley, and that's where you kind of get these kind of situations. So it's interesting, and he'll be in town this weekend, and we'll see what comes out of it. But like you said, another chapter, another installment is coming up this weekend. But more wrinkles to this saga. And I think the other part, I know you have something else you want to add that I'll also bring up that you can also throw in.
Go ahead.
I'm sure a lot of OU fans, and I know it because I've seen our VIP members ask this. If it handled poorly, could OU miss out on both? Is also, I think, a lot of OU fans as well with this whole thing.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add would a great point and layer to this by you, but the only other thing that I was going to add is I've said it again, but I just don't envy anyone in this situation. This is tough for everybody involved. More on that in a second. But to your question, because I've been asked about it a couple of different times. Look, do I think that missing out on both is a possibility? Sure. You can never rule anything out in recruiting, especially today's era of recruiting where, we haven't even tackled the numbers situation. And I hate to put it that way, but it's like, we're talking LSU and Georgia in the mix for Bowe Bentley. And we're talking some heavy hitters hovering around Jaden O'Neal as well. At some point, you're really going to have to pony up and match your words with your investment. And the quarterback position is one that let's just be honest with ourselves. It commands investment. But on that note, and I've kind of hinted at this, I firmly believe that not only does every given program have a position group in each cycle that they choose to prioritize, and they kind of say to themselves, look, like, we're not missing on this position group. We cannot afford to miss. Not only do I believe that's kind of a model that recruiting departments are having to take, I believe Oklahoma showed you that is something they are willing to adapt to by way of last year in the 2025 cycle with offensive line. Like, they could have easily folded in the recruitment of Michael Fasusi, and they didn't. And they ponied up, and they came to the table with an aggressive approach. In the event of not just that being a similar story time this time around, but it being related to the quarterback position, I just have a hard time believing that Oklahoma will not do everything in its power to go get the right quarterback if it has its opportunity. Do I think LSU is a legitimate threat for Bo Bentley? I really do believe that. Georgia is interesting to me because while Georgia has been tied to both of these guys, I think that Georgia is still waiting word from Jared Curtis. And I think Georgia is also linked to a couple of other quarterbacks out there as well. And so if Jared Curtis commits to the Bulldogs again, this all becomes a moot point and suddenly another domino falls. But yeah, it's to me, that's kind of the approach or the mentality you have to have here is Oklahoma really going to miss out on the quarterback it wants at a time where it is pivotal? You go out and get the right signal caller. And so to circle back to the original point that I was going to bring up, I just want to reiterate, like, this is tough for everyone, for Jaden O'Neal, for Bo Bentley, for the Oklahoma staff. I do not envy them as well in this situation, having to kind of balance all of these conversations. And I'm sure that there are a lot of opinions flying around. And so just keep all that in mind out there, folks. Like, treat everybody in this situation with respect, and hopefully everyone kind of comes to the resolution that fits them for the betterment of the future.
No doubt. And Collin's been all over it every step of the way. And again, like we said, Jaden will be in town for the Crimson Combine, so we'll see if, what new developments, if any, come out of that. And I'm sure we'll discuss again in the near future, as we have a lot over the last, couple months plus with this 2026 QB saga. Should we do your favorite thing? What's up?
We're going to keep playing the hits, man. This thing is
every time we go to play the show, it's like there's new stuff to talk about. So it's like, I guess we'll talk about it again because there's been new developments. It's been a saga. I think that's a fair way to put it. Yeah. Should we do your favorite thing? Transfer portal.
All right.
It's about that time.
It's about to fill this thing up with whiskey, huh?
The transfer portal is about to reopen on Wednesday, the post-spring portal window. If you're wondering, isn't this kind of early for the spring game or the Crimson Combine this year? It is, just because OU moved it up to be before the post-spring portal window would open, which is on Wednesday. Oklahoma already in on one player in particular. We'll talk about that in just a second, but we'll also get into what are maybe going to be some needs when the portal window opens. Obviously, the portal giveth, but it also taketh. Guys are going to hop in. OU needs guys to hop in. Tom has talked about that a couple times. They are over the number of scholarship number that they have. Like, they have to shed some bodies. So there's going to be movement here in the very near future, which is our favorite thing here. That's sarcasm with transfer portal. It's a lot, but it's that time of year again in the post-spring portal window. Collin, let's start first with a name in particular. Stanford offensive lineman Jake Maikkula. Hoping I'm saying that correctly. If not, apologies to Jake. Oklahoma likes their Stanford O-lineman. We've done this, obviously going back to Walter Rouse. They currently have Luke Baklenko on the team now, who they got back in the winter. He's been with the team, obviously, this spring. Jake is a veteran. He played, I think I was just looking at it, 11 starts last year with Stanford as a junior, played in 12 games, all 12 games for Stanford. They didn't make a bowl, and started 11 of them. So this is a guy who has played, technically not, or they're in the ACC. I can't keep track with what conference everyone's in. So played at the Power 4 level a year ago. paint a picture a little bit, both in terms of where you think Oklahoma stands with Jake, and then also what would he be? Would he be a depth addition? This is a guy they see as a potential, guy who could play for them, as play a lot of snaps. Kind of just paint the picture all around with Jake Maikkula here, and kind of what he would bring to the table if Oklahoma were to bring him in.
Yeah, starting with the player specifically, 6'5", 295 pounds, multiple game starter along the interior of the offensive line up there at Stanford. Time spent at center and both guard spots. I watched the tape and I like it. I see the vision here because you are potentially getting a very versatile piece at specifically an area of the field that Oklahoma is relatively settled at. But at the same time, we saw just last year how quickly things can derail when you're asked to kind of go into that depth of specifically the interior offensive line group. Now, I think this is a little bit tricky. So I want to emphasize this. Jake has 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. He's a grad transfer, but he technically would have 2 more years of play.
Sure.
That's important because he visits Oklahoma recently at a time where Troy Everett is pretty much entrenched as the starter. And I think, as you and I both know, talking to some team sources, like Troy Everett is seen as a leader in that locker room right now. Yeah. So you have your center. You got a lot of options at guard between Fabechi Wiwu, Eddie Pierre-Louis, Heath Ozida when he comes back, Ryan Foje, what he's doing along the interior.
Mm.
There are a lot of guard pieces on this Oklahoma roster, at least on paper. You're recruiting an offensive lineman in the portal. And as we know, portal offensive linemen with talent, it's hard to come by as it is. Pitching to a player like that with a lot of kind of depth already in place or roles already in place it's tricky. So I've heard the visit went really well. I think everyone was really pleased, and I think a lot of stuff was ironed out. He visits UCLA shortly after that. Other programs, if I remember correctly, that are involved are Houston, North Carolina, and Syracuse. And I believe he's taking visits to those places as well. But he wants to make a decision soon. And as we know, these visits kind of rattle off, and then guys will go ahead and lock things down. So do I think we're close to the end of the finish line here with Jake? I believe that's the case. Where he's at, I don't know. I would love to be able to give you a specific direction, but especially as more is getting ironed out. If Oklahoma were to win out this race, it's essentially saying, look, you're going to come in, you're going to compete for time at center or guard.
Yeah.
Worst comes to worst, you're a rotational or off the bench piece, and then you might be starting at center going into next year. I can't tell you specifically the depth chart situations at a lot of these other programs that are going after him, but sure. I would assume a few of them have a little bit of a clearer path to not just playing time, but a starting role. And so that's kind of the dynamic that OU faces here in relation to Jake, and we'll see what's important. I think that the developmental aspect under Bill Beanbo is a big deal. I think that the Stanford layer that you mentioned is also something on the mind of Jake. And if the Sooners were to win out, man, this would be massive to get another offensive line piece ahead of a second season in the SEC.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting pursuit. You're never going to say no to more offensive linemen, especially after what happened last year in the early part of the year where the depth got really tested and it burned them, in the early part of the season. So you're never going to say no to more depth and guys who have played, obviously have experience actually playing, and especially a guy who could play center for you, because who really is the backup center after Troy Everett right now? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's kind of, there's a few guys, but it's kind of up in the air. So having another option there after Troy, it's great from OU's perspective. So we'll see. It's kind of interesting. Like you said, they have a lot of apparent guard options, but again, you're never going to say no to more if this is a guy that you think can help you and is, again, got to use the word like affordable and things like that. It's kind of like why not, sort of a thing. And also, I should have mentioned, Jake, he's in the portal because Stanford had a coaching change. That's why I'm sure some people might have been wondering, like, you just said the window doesn't open until Wednesday. How's this guy visiting? Had a coaching change, so that's why his window opened up there at Stanford. But we'll see. An interesting name to keep an eye on, and obviously we'll continue to follow throughout the next however long that process takes with Jake.
Yeah.
Elsewhere in the portal, what do they need? The window's about to open. We kind of speculated a little bit on this back in January, when the winter portal cycle was kind of starting to wind down. Where do you think the attention is going to go for Oklahoma? I want to start first with wide receiver. I think that's an obvious place to start. We didn't talk about it on Monday. I can't remember when this time is mush as far as when this kind of all started to become apparent. But
yeah,
we'll know by now. Giovanni Gibson suffered a fairly serious. It's still early, so nothing's for sure, but it looks like a pretty substantial, lower leg injury in practice this week that's going to keep him out for an extended period. That room has been outside of him just banged up again. Now, I don't think anything, too long-term for anyone else. I don't think, right? But that room has been beat up again. Giovanni, who is having a great camp, is looked at and feared to have suffered a pretty substantial injury. We'll see how much it affects the season we get there. Again, you don't want to speculate too much because we don't know a whole lot yet. But It's a position that's beat up. Last year, it was just a graveyard. Everyone was hurt the whole year. They could never get anyone on the field. And you kind of didn't have a great spring in that regard again. Do you think Oklahoma chases wide receivers? And I know there's one interesting name in particular that you want to bring up as well. But kind of the wide receiver room, is that something you think is going to be a priority here when the window opens in a few days?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. When the winter window ended, I thought, all right, that's the receiver room. They're done.
Yeah, I mean, they had
and now it's weird because I kind of mentioned this on the board the other day. It's like, and I'm not sure I've done a great job of kind of vocalizing not my stance, but kind of the situation here. It's like, man, if you just get relatively good news on the Giovanni Gibson front, you're arguably still set for the fall, which is the ultimate priority. Obviously, they're banged up in the spring. Like, we don't have time to sit here and talk about all the kind of nagging injuries and bumps and bruises some of the other guys in that room are dealing with. But on the off chance, and I'm not saying that this is happening, but on the off chance you get a miracle and you get some word that maybe Giovanni Gibson is going to be able to take the field sometime this fall, it's like Deion Burks is still on track to play. Some of these guys that are dealing with the nicks and the scratches, they're still on track to play. And so it's like, how much can you afford to go out and spend in terms of scholarship spots and whatever else? That being said, it's like, I can't rule out change in that room in the window. Bodies out means bodies in. And look, these injuries, like Jaden Gibson is still floating around. And so I do expect Oklahoma to not only look at receiver, but I would say take a calculated shot or two as far as guys that they probably feel can come in and make a move for them right away. Now, I know that out on the social media sphere, a lot of the fans are making graphics about former Oklahoma wide receiver Trajan Bridges.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, time flies, doesn't it?
He was here so long ago that there's not a soul on this team coaching. I mean, I guess a couple of coaches, but certainly not on the roster that knows him at all. I mean, it's been that long. It's pretty crazy that we've
would it be like Bill Bedenbow and that's
DeMarco?
It?
Yeah, I mean
DeMarco.
I mean, yeah, it's just like know him. Yeah, that'd be it.
Yeah. Anyway, It's crazy, like how this stuff comes full circle. Look, do I think that there is interest? Sure. I mean, why not? I guess is the way to say it. Do I think that this is actively something that's like happening right now? I would pump the brakes a little bit. Sure. I think that what's important to consider is patience with this portal window. And this isn't just at receiver, but this is across the board, because I know that a couple of names have kind of flown in advance of the portal window opening. And there are fan bases that I see all over college football being like, oh, we're going to go get that guy. And it's like, well, what if someone else goes in and you're like, oh, crap, I actually want that player instead. Well, I've talked to a lot of personnel people over the last few days and like just trying to get a sense of what the spring window is even going to be, like who they expect to go in. And I think the way I've been kind of phrasing it is like everyone is really going to have to pick and choose their battles. Like you really are going to have to believe in a player to accept the outcome. Like, I just don't know how much true talent is going to be available in the spring, considering the winter is usually when those guys go in. And I also wouldn't be surprised if this window, and this is me just kind of speaking on just some stuff that I've talked to some folks about, I wouldn't be surprised if the spring window has a lot of bodies in that's more inexperienced on the younger side, but like there's kind of that long-term potential. And so with that being kind of the unknown commodity concept in this portal window, you're going to have to place some bets, I guess is what I'm saying. And so keep your chips close, get ready to kind of go all in on certain players. And I think not just for all of these positions, but especially for a receiver, given what they did in the winter window, you're really going to have to invest in certain players. And that's what I kind of expect them to do.
Yeah. And I'll add to just real quick on the Trajan Bridges thing, removing any sort of opinion on, should Oklahoma do it? Obviously everyone remembers what happened. I don't need to regurgitate that.
Right.
What a story it would be. I mean, it'd be wild. It would be legitimately crazy.
Yeah.
He was here. I mean, a different world from when he was here last time. I mean, it was Spencer Rattler and Lincoln Riley. Like it was a different world. I mean, it feels like it would be just, again, I'm not saying, oh, you should do it or whatever. Not any opinion. Just if it did happen, it would be crazy. It would be legitimately crazy. It would be nuts. So we'll see. It was a long time ago, but something to keep an eye on. And it's certainly the name pops off. Everyone, OU fans are like, wow, what would that be? We'll see. Elsewhere in the portal, as far as other positions, where else do you think they need to address, or will they address? I mean, obviously, tight end is interesting because he just lost Devon Mitchell, but you also have a million tight ends on this team. It's a position with a lot of bodies. Now, you might have some guys leave. Obviously, the portal, people leave also. So we'll see what happens.
But a lot of those guys in tight end room specifically were added in the winter window. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's added a bunch of tight ends then. You probably, I mean, again, Devon's moving on, or he's no longer with the program. We talked about that earlier this week. So that's one less than you had before, but you still have a lot. And then defensively, they only added 2 in the previous cycle with Kendall Daniels and Marvin Jones. We had talked about maybe a corner, maybe a D tackle at that time. That never happened. Where else do you think is going to be a priority in this post-spring portal window, whether because you think they're going to do it or do you think they should do it in this, this post-spring cycle here coming up before the summer and the fall?
So I personally believe that you should go corner. Yeah, I just like corner to me is the only true question mark on that side of the ball. I like the linebackers in that room. I think you can go linebacker in the portal window, certainly. Mm-hmm. That would kind of be my honorable mention on the defensive side of the ball. But I mean, especially the way that Kendall Daniels has come in and supplemented that group. Samuel Mosigo is on his trajectory. You'll get Kendall Dolby back for the fall potentially at Cheetah. Like, I like a lot of those second-level defender bodies that they have.
Yeah.
And Eli Bowen being banged up, the curious case of Gentry Williams continues.
Right.
Jacoby Johnson, a learning curve, I would say, is probably the fair way to phrase it last year.
Moved to receiver for a little while.
And like John Malone is now a lack of a body in there, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would go corner. I would prioritize the perimeter defender side, and I think that there will be cornerback talent out there because even if it's not a multi-year starter, on paper, if a younger corner goes in the portal, there are worse things that you could do than add a younger secondary defender with some time spent at the collegiate level. So I think corner, honorable mention linebacker on that side of the ball. Unless you disagree, I think they're fine at defensive line. I really do.
Yeah.
Like the edge group's pretty much solidified, and defensive tackle to me, like you have Dominic Williams, Grayson Holton, David Stone, Jaden Jackson for the fall. And Marcus Strong has suddenly become kind of a social media darling.
Yeah.
So
I love Trent Wilson too. I know he's a freshman, but man,
Trent's killing it. And that's other interesting thing too, is it's like in the case of like a Cortland Guillory, that's kind of okay. Sure. Do you debate that at corner and all that? But then
Lee Hawkins,
like you have younger guys, Amarian Robinson in the safety room. Like I think safety is fine. Like don't touch that group, you know? So there's that. Wide receiver. I'm going to ask you, tight end or running back? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you could actually get it depends. I mean, it all depends on what you're getting. I guess I would say tight end if you can get, and that's not just to dump on the tight ends that are there. But right now, you are relying on probably Will Huggins, who's a Pittsburgh State transfer, as your tight end one right now. You played in Kansas before. We actually just talked to him the other day for the first time. It's on the YouTube channel. He's got great size and everything, but that's a huge jump for him. Carson Kent from Kennesaw State, John Locke, Louisiana Tech, or Jaron Kanik, who's a converted linebacker. Like, you just don't have anything that you would say is anything even close to a sure thing. Now, all those guys could be good, right? I'm not going to say any of them. I'm not going to sit here and say they're all going to stink, but if you could get somebody, preferably up from the Power 5 level, that you can just feel good about at tight end.
Yeah.
At least is like a reliable, like this guy's not going to win a Mackey, but we kind of know what we're getting. That would be of high interest to me. Running back room. I mean, I'm more curious. A running back of who leaves, is anybody going to leave? Because that room has got a lot of bodies still, with Barnes and Sawchuk, and Tatum's not. I mean, he's with baseball, so he's kind of in and out. But obviously Xavier Robinson and Torrey Blaylock looks awesome. Like, it's kind of just Sam Franklin's still around. Like, there's a lot of guys in that room. So does anybody leave is a question for me. But I would take a tight end if you can get it. I know they have a million of them, but you need it.
Here's where I struggle with tight end. You added a ton in the winter window, admitting defeat, right?
Yeah.
But part of what they brought in that left it a question mark going into the spring is because going and getting a starting caliber tight end in the portal, it feels incredibly rare. And
it does.
Like, I know that they were an example that comes to mind is that they were involved with like a Holden Stays, Notre Dame, and then I think ended up at Tennessee. And then he was on the move again. And it's like, when these high caliber tight ends or these high potential tight ends go in the portal, you don't just get to walk into their house and make them sign a contract.
Look at Bauer Sharp's market. He landed LSU. I mean, it kind of tells you what the market's like. Again, not to just dump on Bauer Sharp, but I mean, I think when he hit the portal, I don't know if anyone thought, oh, he's going to land at an SEC powerhouse as their starting tight end,
But I'm glad you said that, because it backs up the point I'm trying to make. It's like, in theory, we can sit here and talk about, oh, well, they need to go get another tight end. Who's to say that the tight ends that they could realistically get aren't on the same caliber as a Will Huggins? I don't know.
Very possible. Right.
And so that's what's tough, is the supply and demand concept, especially in the spring. It's already bleak. And then you talk about a position group like tight end, and it's like, you're going to be fighting like hell to go get guys away from other programs that are in need at that position. And so I don't know. That's where I'm like, I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation level for the fan base, because again, like, it's way easier said than done to go into the portal window this time of year and go get a guy that, without a shadow of doubt, upgrades your room completely. Yeah. And you get him over a number of other programs who are interested. You know what I mean?
No doubt. So we'll see. It's about to open on Wednesday. And again, I said it already a couple times, but people will get in the portal. So maybe something that doesn't feel like a need right now becomes one. We're not expecting anything crazy, but you never know.
Yeah.
It's college football. You never know. Nico Iamaleava is missing practice today for Tennessee the day before their spring game. Crazy things happen, right? So
yeah,
who knows? And we'll be sure to cover it all, as we always do. Well, we're on the website, oklahoma.247sports.com. Become a VIP member. Keep up with all the portal latest, and obviously on the recruiting side, a big weekend coming up, and spring ball is coming up for high school football and stuff. So it's ramping up. Well, we're just trying before we start recording. Those summer camps in Norman are going to be here before you know it in early June, sweating buckets out there, Collin and I. And so we're getting to that time of year. So it's a great time to subscribe if you're want to keep up with recruiting content, especially. A lot there for you and more to come.
All right, give me a score prediction for the Crimson Combine, if that's even how this goes.
I assume the 7-on-7 will be like, Crimson versus Cream or whatever, red versus white. So I'll go. I feel like this is Red's year. I'm gonna go red.
Yeah,
red by a tutty.
I'm gonna give Oklahoma the victory here in the Crimson Combine. I don't know.
Oklahoma will win. The loser will be us. Probably. But we'll see. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe the greatest thing ever.
This is legitimately the first time in years that I will not get to watch a spring game at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I have physically, I'm probably like many of you out there, I want to contribute to our site's coverage, but I will be at a 7-on-7 tournament instead, because I can't watch the dang thing. So
yeah,
let's see how this goes.
I'm very curious.
Yeah.
It's gonna be weird seeing the stadium presumably quite empty. Fans will come. OU fans are diehard, and there's a lot of sickos out there who will, I say that affectionately, who will be there. It's gonna be great weather, which helps, but it's not gonna be, it's not gonna be packed by any means. So it's, kind of weird, to see the stadium so partially filled while the football team is doing stuff, but
yeah.
We'll see. We'll see what it looks like. We'll be there, and we'll offer whatever coverage we can.
The easy thing to do is to dump on this thing, but I just want to say that, like, I'm just genuinely curious. I have no idea what to expect, and I want to see what the fan turnout is like. I want to see what the recruit reviews are like, and I legitimately, it's kind of weird because it's like I'm going to be glued to the highlight package that you put together for us on the YouTube channel, because I will have literally no idea what's going on Saturday afternoon. So see how this goes.
No doubt. We'll have lots of coverage, and the expectation is Brent Venables and, players, maybe assistant coaches that's floating around. Not banking on that, but potentially will be available tomorrow. So we'll have coverage, whatever it looks like, from Norman. Tom, James, myself will all be there. So be sure to keep up with us over at Sooners Illustrated. The podcast will be back on Monday, Tom and James, to wrap up the Crimson Combine and whatever else going on the football side, as well as obviously Diamond Sports, basketball portal, all that good stuff will be on Monday. And then Collin and I will be back late next week, probably on Thursday, to recap the latest on the recruiting side after this big weekend coming up for Oklahoma. That's it. And the portal will have just opened as well. So get to do probably more of that, I'm sure. That's it. We'll be back next week. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway signing off. See you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.